Hey everyone, welcome back. I know a lot of you have been following the whole trade war situation with the U.S. and how it could hit Canada's economy, especially with the Bank of Canada making some moves lately.
Yeah, definitely a lot of uncertainty floating around out there right now.
Exactly. And it really got me thinking, the Bank of Canada just lowered interest rates again for like the sixth time in a row. But can they really, fight off the impact of potential tariffs? That's what we're going to deep dive into today.
Should be interesting.
So we've been looking at some recent reports and statements, and it seems like things are getting pretty serious. I mean, we've got President Trump threatening a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, which could happen as early as February 1st.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And the Bank of Canada is definitely reacting. This latest interest rate cut brings it down to 3%.
Right, 3%. But here's the thing, that cut is actually smaller than the last two.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, it seems like they're trying to be cautious. Maybe not quite slamming on the brakes, but definitely tapping them a bit.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like they're trying to find that balance, right?
Right.
Between stimulating the economy but also not overreacting.
Totally. And it's tough because they're dealing with all this uncertainty around the trade war. Like, how long will these tariffs actually last? Will they even happen at all? Nobody really knows.
Okay, so let's talk about those tariffs for a second. What do they actually mean for everyday Canadians? Like, how would they actually feel the impact?
Well, think about it this way. Tariffs make imported goods more expensive, right?
Right, so for importing stuff from the U.S., it'll cost more.
Exactly. So everything you buy that comes from the US, your clothes, electronics, even things like produce and lumber, those prices could all start going up.
Oof, that's not great.
Yeah, and that leads to inflation, which basically means your money doesn't go as far.
And I guess that's where the interest rate cuts come in. The Bank of Canada is trying to make borrowing cheaper to help offset those rising prices.
Right. They're hoping that'll encourage businesses to invest and for people to keep spending, even if prices are going up.
It sounds like a pretty delicate balancing act, though.
Oh, for sure. And like we were saying earlier, nobody really knows how bad this trade war could get. That makes it really hard for the Bank of Canada to plan their next move.
It's kind of like they're battening down the hatches, preparing for a storm, but not knowing how strong it'll actually be.
Exactly. And you can see that in what some economists are saying. Like Doug Porter from BMO, he used that exact analogy, battening down the hatches.
Right, so it's not just some abstract economic theory we're talking about here. It could have real, tangible effects for people in Canada.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say these tariffs do happen. What are some of the industries in Canada that you think would be hit the hardest?
Well, anything that relies heavily on exporting to the US would be vulnerable for sure. Like the Canadian lumber industry, they've been a target of US trade actions before.
Right, I remember that.
And the auto industry, that's another big one.
Yeah, true. So what could we see? Job losses, like less investment in those sectors.
Potentially, yeah. It would definitely have a ripple effect.
And beyond the actual tariffs themselves, there's just this overall cloud of uncertainty hanging over the economy. I'm seeing economists like Simon Gaudreau from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business talking about super high uncertainty being a major concern for businesses.
Right. It's a huge factor. If businesses don't know what's coming next, they're going to be hesitant to invest or expand their operations. And that can really slow down the whole economy.
Makes sense. So the Bank of Canada is trying to, send a signal with these rate cuts that they're doing what they can to support growth.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. They're trying to create some stability, even though they're in uncharted waters. But, there are different perspectives out there. Some economists, like Toon Guillen at RSM Canada, she's saying these tariffs could actually create this push and pull situation.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, on the one hand, tariffs could lead to higher prices, like we've been talking about, and normally that would mean the Bank of Canada should raise interest rates to try to control inflation. But on the other hand, tariffs could also weaken demand because people just aren't buying as much because things are more expensive.
Right, and usually that would mean the Bank of Canada should lower interest rates to encourage people to spend more.
Exactly. So they're kind of caught in the middle. They have to figure out which force is going to be stronger, the upward pressure on prices from tariffs or the downward pressure on demand.
Man, that sounds like a tough call to make.
It is. It's a balancing act for sure.
Well, after looking at all this, it's pretty clear that the Bank of Canada has a tough job ahead of them. They're trying to navigate a very complicated situation with a lot of unknowns, and their power to really influence the outcome of this trade war is limited. So here's something to think about. What steps could the Canadian government take to try to mitigate the potential damage? Could they offer targeted support for industries that might be hit the hardest? What about looking at new trade deals with other countries to diversify Canada's economic relationships? It's a complex issue, but definitely one worth considering.
For sure. A lot to unpack here, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely, and we'll be here to keep you updated as things develop. Thanks for tuning into this deep dive, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.